Welcome to SongSmith, Season 3, Episode 3. We're coming to you live from the St. Andrew and St. Luke Church, Episcopal Church here in Beacon, New York. Tonight's show is going to be a little different than ones you've seen previously in that there are no lyrics. The music will be instrumental, but that does not mean by any stretch that it doesn't have a message and a story. Our artists tonight, Gwen Laster, accompanied by Melanie Dyer and Alex Waterman. Collectively, they are New Muse. Please welcome them. Beautiful, beautiful. For the benefit of those watching at home, I am now going to read a brief biography so we can learn a little bit more about the artists, and then we'll talk. Gwen Laster is a nationally acclaimed musician who has received awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Jubilation Foundation, the Puffin Foundation, Arts Mid-Hudson, Lila Wallace, and first place in the Hennessy Cognac Jazz Search. She's a Detroit native whose creative influences come from the Motor City's diverse musical culture. She has collaborated and performed with artists including Anthony Braxton, Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, Danny Elfman, Sun Ra, Andrea Bocelli, Alicia Keys, and many, many more. She is also the founder of Creative Strings Improvisers Orchestra, which is a music education ensemble for young players. I'll mention now that later in the show we will be taking audience questions. If you have questions for the group, you can put them in the chat and they will magically appear here to me at some point. But for the moment, let's just start right at the beginning. Welcome to SongSmith, guys.
Thank you.
Gwen, let me just ask you, Detroit, I think of Motown, I think of the MC5. I don't necessarily think of this sort of music. Is there a scene of this kind in Detroit? Is there a classical, modern classical type of thing there?
Oh yeah, there's everything in Detroit, and that's what I grew up with. And so it was always from the beginning blurred lines. There was never any distinction between genres. It was only distinction between good music or not good music. So it's still the same way. There are many influences, many people that influenced me in my growing up, starting with my mother and my parents, who loved blues and jazz, and they weren't musicians, but they were big-time music lovers. So my mother played a lot of different music around the house. Blues was, I think, her favorite. And then growing up in Detroit, Motown was always on the turntable. And my father loved classical music, particularly contemporary classical. So he kind of turned me on to like Arnold Bax and a bunch of other composers that I really didn't know about. But so it was always kind of in my listening, in my ears growing up. And I had very progressive music educators in the Detroit public schools. So they started me early on improvising and playing by ear on piano. And they were improvisers and jazz players themselves. So yeah.
Did you always know you wanted to write, or did you envision yourself as a player when you started out?
Oh, I didn't even think about writing when I first started out. I thought about, like, how do I play this instrument? Because there was always so much repertoire that was way beyond what I could do with my skill level. So I always just thought about how could I get better on my instrument? Who can I study with? How many different kinds of music. I didn't think about specifically how many different genres I could play on my instrument, but that came to me in my experience of my teachers, of my peers. My friends were playing all kinds of music. I mean, anything from rock and roll to jazz to straight ahead to everything. So my concern and my energy was primarily to engage myself on my instrument and improve and to get to know it. Mm-hmm.
When I listen to the music, the last piece, Blue Lotus, I hear just so many things going through there. I mean, there's the obvious sort of classical influence. Mm-hmm. There's strains of even traditional Irish fiddles. Some of the cello lines to me are reminiscent of almost funk bass lines. It all sort of comes together. When I look at your website and I see some of the hashtags you use to describe, you use things like jazz fusion, modern, classical. Do you categorize your music in any way, or is that just because people need boxes to be able to identify things?
Yeah, that's because people need boxes. I'd like to think that at some point that we as a collective have created some kind of category. On our own or are without a category, and it's just, this is music, we're expressing ourselves collectively with through composed ideas as well as improvised ideas. I think that we enjoy just keeping it as a broad definition of what we're how we express our music and what we study and what we express, what we do, and how we perform.
And nothing is off limits to you in terms of your ability to incorporate a style, a flavor, a tone into when you're writing. You're wide open to any possibility.
Yeah, it seems like that. I'm wide open to whatever is at the moment inspiring me, and what other ensembles I play in, and what I'm listening to, and so all of that inspires me. And I think that's the most important thing about writing, is to just be in the moment of wherever you are and whatever is inspiring you, and to express that.
Let's talk a little bit about process. When we've had songwriters on the show before who are wordsmiths, lyricists, there's very often a linear trajectory. The song has a beginning, a middle, and end, and there's a story that's being told. What's your compositional process? Do you think of a musical narrative? How do you approach writing a piece of music?
It's usually a life experience. It's usually something that I've read, or something that I'm in conversation about, or something that I do that brings me a certain emotion. So it's usually a life experience, or something that I'm totally inspired by and that I want to learn a lot more about. So I'm indulging myself in that knowledge, and in that I'm interested in learning more about it. So that's always a good way for me to give myself the test of writing about that. Or it could be a transcription of music that I'm working on that inspires me in some way, or reading about other composers, or watching documentaries about other people's writing process. All of it. It's usually a life experience for me.
So it sounds like you're not really limited by one particular methodology. You're just going with whatever the flow happens to be at the moment.
Yeah, and then once that flow kind of defines itself, I try to study more about how I should expand on that idea, and compositional techniques, and listen to interviews of composers that I respect and want to learn from, and listen to their creative process and their compositional process, and basically just try to find mentors and do a lot of listening.
What's the first hook that you get into when you're starting to, you sit down with a blank piece of paper in front of you? Is it a melodic motif, a rhythmic idea, or is it entirely driven by expressing whatever the subtext, the message is that you want to put across?
I think it's the message, and then it comes into a tonality is important, and then a rhythm. It's hard to say once it's done. I mean, when I'm in it, I sort of know what's going on, but then when I look back at pieces, I don't even remember how that actually happened. I think different pieces have a different backdrop to how they happen, and some of them are from watching videos or documentaries, like I mentioned earlier. So I think every piece has a different inspirational kind of background or starting point.
And when do you know consciously that if you establish, let's say, a melodic idea, a theme, that you want to bring it back later on, or do you just sort of write your way into it and then think, oh, this would be a good place to put that back again, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm thinking about some kind of story all the time, and so I'm thinking about if that theme should come back. And above all of this, I'm thinking about who is going to be playing this music. Personally, I mean, I don't think about instrument. I actually think about people.
Really? Wow.
Like what's going to sound. It's kind of like you're dressing your kids, and you look at what looks good on them, what colors look good on them. What size are they? So I think about that when I'm writing the music. Like, okay, this is going to be for Melanie and Alex, so I know how they play, so let me write this because they really sound good doing this particular thing, or so I'm thinking about people and what sounds good on them and what's going to inspire them to give me some feedback to help the piece grow.
So let me just ask the other folks here, Melanie and Alex, when Gwen presents you with a piece of music and is looking for that feedback, what sorts of feedback do you give her when that is presented to you? And how much feedback is, is it always positive?
Well, it's a conversation. It's always a conversation with this music. And, first we try the conversation with the instruments. And then we try a little bit with, there's always a lot of questions too. Where do you want this to go? What should we open this section up a little bit more here? Should we do this? So it's questions, but a lot of the conversation just happens with the instruments, and we're trying it out. And for the composer, oftentimes it's the first time they're hearing it really on the instruments, and so it's always it's always an experience of exchange and back and forth.
Fantastic. Melanie, anything to add?
Oh, I would agree with Alex. I think the conversation begins with the music, and a lot of times, the music is telling you what it wants you to do, and I think in the process of working through a piece, and other than just making corrections or any other types of things that need to be done with the basic written language of the piece. I think it's just about trying things out, or you might do something and Gwen might say, well, I like what you did there, let's keep that, or let's try to approach this from a different process. Let's try to dismantle this construction a little bit and see what we come up with there. Let's play around with the form. We may go from something that sounds very like a fully realized piece to something that's very kind of minimalist interpretations, or I think the piece also evolves with the ensemble over time. We discover new things in the music, and the music shows us new things, ways of being. Sometimes it's also because maybe a voice is missing and we're having to cover that, just how adapting to the circumstances to make sure that the intent or the narrative speaks through us, the musician, as vehicles for whatever is going to occur, and oftentimes it's a real surprise.
Gwen, do you ever write something and you bring it and you play it, and then you're like, oh boy, back to the drawing board?
Oh yeah, always. I just come with a little bit, and then maybe I expand it, and
they're shaking their heads
always.
no.
No, but
It's usually pretty damn good.
Well,
You've never gone back and really rewritten.
Not I don't go back and, well, when you say back to the drawing board, for me that means back to the drawing board to expand it more.
I see.
Not necessarily to take away something, because something to be said about just following your instinct on that first time. Whatever you get that first time, I just believe it. You stick with it, and then you can expand it from there. But nothing is like, oh, I'm going to trash that. I got so many pieces of manuscript paper at home with just little melodies and little ideas, and I just like, what? Let's just keep that. Maybe that'll come back, and I'll be able to expand on that. So that's what I mean by back to the drawing board.
Yep.
That I'm expanding on it. I'm still working on it, and there's something about just keeping that first thought that's important, I think, with music and with composing. Just kind of sticking with it, believing in it.
That's a really interesting idea. Will you play us something else?
Sure.
First of all, I just have to say that the interplay is remarkable. I mean, it's amazing. I'm sitting here just completely in awe of how you do that. That piece is called Cigarette. That's the first movement of the Black Lives Matter suite. Talk a little bit about the genesis of the Black Lives Matter suite, how it came to be, what the story is, and what it means.
That was my reaction to the Sandra Bland tragedy, coupled with a personal story of just being pulled over here in the Hudson Valley for no apparent reason, and they happened to see that a ticket that wasn't an insurance that lapsed for 9 days, about a month before I was pulled over. And, you know, car towed, showing up in court twice, new license plate, all kind of stuff like that. Being in the back of the cop car, sitting there waiting, being interrogated, searched. And so this all occurred right before the Sandra Bland. And so when I heard about it, I was like, it just brought me to tears. And I had an opportunity to play string quartet music of other composers at that time. And so that's how New Muse started, actually, is that I wrote this first movement about Sandy Bland, and that became a commission work, and it allowed me to write a couple of other movements that also were informed by social injustices. And so that's the premise of the Black Lives Matter suite and Cigarette. And I wrote it too, actually. We were talking earlier about platforms to write, and I actually watched the video of the arrest, and I wrote the music to the arrest.
And the title Cigarette comes from?
It comes from the video from when the officer asked her to please put out her cigarette in the video. And she said, "Why, I'm in my car, why do I have to put out my cigarette?" And that's when all the hell broke loose and everything.
And the second and third movements of the piece also reference, the third movement references the Newburgh Four right across the river from us here at the moment.
Right, references the Newburgh Four, and there's a spoken word artist, Poet Gold, that creates her narrative, and there's another artist who didn't record on the music, but she also created the narrative as part of it, Calandra Hackney. And then the second movement references something here, not too far from Beacon, at the Fishkill Correctional Center, where there was a gentleman, Samuel Harrell, who was, his life was taken by the correction officers there in that prison. So that was all part of some of the guidelines that were given to me as part of the commission. So that's how the Black Lives Matter suite
Now,
evolved.
when you write something like this, I'm reminded, and this may be an oversimplification, the record that I had as a kid of Peter and the Wolf, where the instruments of the orchestra played different characters. Does that kind of process work when you're writing a piece of music like this?
Absolutely. Sandra Bland, well, some of the themes that I played are, for this version of our trio, the theme that I played came from, it was a variation on a theme by an artist named Sheila Chandra, who wrote a piece called Ever So Lonely. And I don't know why I thought of it, but I was just thinking of things, and I said, this is somebody that I'd heard, and I took that theme, and we kind of do all kinds of variation on that theme throughout the Cigarette movement. And in terms of instruments being character, I always thought about Sandra as the violist. I always thought that the viola was the lead voice in Sandra's, for her character. And that somehow the cello was kind of like the bad guy, the police officer.
There are some ominous lines from the cello there, yeah.
That's for the first time.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, I didn't know.
Breaking news
Wow.
on SongSmith, hey.
Right, but you know, the deep voice. Yeah.
Is that going to, well, let me just turn it to these guys. Now that you know this, is that going to inform how you play this piece going forward?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I think, you know, as a creative musician myself, I beg to differ. I find other things in the music than that, and I think there's my reading of it is that there's definitely something sinister in that part, and there's something that's brewing. There's something that's dark.
Yeah.
There's a real darkness there, and there's a feeling of urgency and of panic and of imminence, imminent danger. But I didn't know I was the cause of it. But yeah, I think the darkness is there. I'll keep playing the darkness, but I don't want to embody the bad guy.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather.
Well, ultimately, you're spreading light. I mean, you're playing a dark role to call attention to a hopefully an uplifting and positive message. But everybody's got to, it's like being the bad guy in a movie. Somebody's got to be the enemy so the good guy can win. But so when you talked about, how you write from personal experience and you're influenced by that, do you find there's a difference when you're writing for a social cause like this versus just writing a piece of music that might be inspired by your life, but not a particularly, not a horrific crime or something like that? Do you approach it differently when you know that you're writing with this kind of a message in mind?
I don't think technically I do. I just try to, I just think about being, how to be expansive with the knowledge that I have in terms of technical knowledge, sounds, chord structures, voicings, articulation, understanding of the inner workings of sound, and try to write for different configurations so I can learn more about those kinds of combinations of instruments that create different sound colors, textures. And so I don't think the approach is different other than I just try to think of how to learn, how to combine instruments more to express a certain theme or emotion or sound or fabric of meaning or something.
And the next piece you're going to play, Civilization Viral, also has a social component. It was composed during the pandemic.
It was composed during the pandemic, and it was it was kind of the piece that brought me out of my dullness during the pandemic. I think I was somewhat paralyzed in the beginning, and definitely creatively paralyzed. I mean, I could pick up my instrument and play it and practice. Alex and I were just talking about how you can practice and you can do scales and you can practice your etudes and your Charlie Parker and your Bach and all of that, but it just doesn't. You're wondering what's the light at the end of the tunnel if you're not going to be playing with people, or if you're not going to. Somehow that needs to channel you into some kind of creativity. So we had an opportunity to do a quarantine concert, and so
Chicago Jazz String Summit.
Right.
All of these, we were supposed to go to Chicago, and all of these, everybody had to pivot, and so the Chicago Jazz String Summit pivoted to one of the first live stream, that were being offered. At the time, hosted by Experimental Sound Studio in Chicago. And so we masked up and social distanced in a room, and we did a live stream program over Twitch TV. And we took a chance.
Yeah, and I said
And we weren't able to do it with the full, ensemble because there was just too much, not enough space, not enough certainty, and not enough money. So
I used that as a excuse to write something, like to get myself out of it, like push myself out of this whatever I'm in, and just. And it was untitled at first, and then we, much like this platform, we had questions and answers that were coming through, and Melanie put it out there, what does this sound like? We need a title. So one of your best friends, suggested Civilization Viral, so.
Great. Would you play it for us? We can talk some more on the other side.
Sure.
Before you played, you were saying that there was sort of a little COVID paralysis set in at the early stages. I think all of us experienced that to some degree. With the current state of our culture or society here in the United States, if not all over the world, between the wake of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, January 6th insurrection, how does the current state of society and culture affect your creativity?
It pumps it up, and it's more to think about. It's more to take in, it's more to conceptualize, it's more to absorb. And I think if you're thinking about creating a healthy way to deal with all of that information that's coming in, it can be a way to have more to say through your music. It can be a way to make interpretations, have a perspective, create more opportunities to express yourself that way. If you compose music, yeah, it can be that way, but even just playing your instrument can be a different approach. Just knowing what you know about what's going on, and I think all of that just creates some kind of way to feel grounded and to feel more stable and to, make your creative juices count or mean something, have a perspective, some kind of meaning. I think it's important. I think when you're, for me at least, when I was first composing music, I was just thinking about music, like, melodies, harmonies, all the theoretical things that but I think for me as an artist, and you're older, I think you kind of have a sort of a responsibility to create something that's going to say something to people and that maybe will trigger some thoughts, some different patterns, some different ways of thinking, and some kind of change.
You just anticipated what exactly was my next question. Was, do you think that as an artist you have a duty or a responsibility to reflect the world around you, beautiful, ugly, whatever it may be?
Yeah, because I think that I'm biased, but I think artists are the people that are changing the world, that are making their voices heard. I think this is the way we've been surviving as a society, is because artists and lovers of artists and lovers of the art are creating these ways to have this contribution in society. So yeah, I think it's good. I don't want to make that word responsible like a real heavy word, but it's a good thing to do, I think. Yeah.
So now the next thing that you're going to play, you're going to do some free improvisation, and then move into a piece that Melanie composed. One piece, is that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Please play for us, and we'll talk about it on the other side. When you improvise like that, is it just purely listen and respond, or do you have a theme or a framework in mind when you start that you depart from?
That was a lot of listening. Yeah, when we first started, we just listened to what everybody was saying and created a dialogue around that.
Amazing. And Melanie, you composed the portion called When Peace. What is that about? The title certainly suggests certain things.
Well, I just feel like we have been battered. I certainly felt like I have been battered over the last, socially and politically and economically battered over the course of not just the past year, but, some prior years. I won't say, in some respects, maybe more politically in most respects. And at the beginning of the pandemic lockdown, I noticed that there was a certain stillness that because of the fear and the lockdown, there was a certain stillness that sort of coated the earth at that time. And we started to see some regenerative processes taking place because there were no cars, there wasn't as much congestion, and so the skies were cleaning up, and wild animals were appearing in places where we don't normally see them, and that sort of thing. But then I think there was this slight glimmer of the possibility of environmental healing, and with some of the activism that was taking place over the year, there was also this glimmer of this hope for transition on other social fronts, and then there was just this this digging descent, at least in the United States, into this resistance to change that, to me, is must be imminent in order for the survival of pretty much all sentient beings. And it just seems so damn pointless, and the possibility of making that transition to something that is better for all of us seems so possible. I mean, almost, I know it's not simple, but it seems like it should be, because it makes rational, sense. And so, the continued, clawing away from truth and, everything that seems right, just was, for me, raised this, question, like, when, if not now, when, like, and so that's really what sort of drove this idea. But I have to say, like, that's the feeling, but at that point at which the writing begins, and it's just really a simple, very simple sketch. There's really, I'm not a forensic composer, so, by a long shot. So, it's just something, you're a vehicle, and it comes through you, and the music doesn't ask you what it wants to be, You know, it tells you what it wants to be, and there it is, and you give it to these musicians, and they make something of it that is much greater than anything that you could possibly imagine. And, you know, and then there's people who listen, and that, you know, closes the circle of sound and meaning and expression and whatever thoughts arise from it that are thoughts that you never owned in the first place.
Wow. Music is bigger than all of us. So what is next for you? What's next? Is there anything upcoming that you want to talk about?
We got
Yeah.
some stuff coming up.
Yeah, we're gonna play for the Cabo organization outside in Katona, and they are interested in expanding their listeners in the community in Katona. And we're going to also play for the community here in Beacon on the 29th at the Pete Seeger Riverside Park. We'll be playing there. And then we're doing a multimedia shoot of Cigarette that you heard earlier. And we're adding a choreographer and a dancer there. So we're focusing on that Cigarette, the initial or the root of this ensemble. So we're doing a multimedia project around Cigarette, and so I'm really excited about that, to have a dancer to interpret that music. And we'll be playing live in a wonderful space here in the Hudson Valley to do that, and visual people that are gonna put a magic on it once we get it done. So
And then we also have Juneteenth, something coming up.
oh, in New Paltz, the other ensemble of musicians that I play with on another recording, will be doing something in New Paltz with the Unison Arts Organization on Juneteenth, which is June the 19th. And we're starting to really get out and play the different places and tour with the Blue Lotus project. So we're going to be moving around a little bit, hopefully to the West and the Midwest, and coming up with new music to play, new content as we continue to grow.
Oh. And where should people go if they want to learn about where you're going to be, or if they want to purchase your music? Where would you
Well, they can go to my website, gwenlaster.com, and they can purchase the music at Bandcamp. It'll click you right to Bandcamp. You can go to Bandcamp and look for Gwen Laster Blue Lotus, and you'll see our music, and you'll be able to hear, I think we only played 2 tracks from the recording. There are 6 tracks there, so they can listen to some of the other pieces that we've recorded, and keep us in your ears, because we're just starting to blossom and continue to re-emerge in different reincarnations and do all kinds of different.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having us.
I'd like to have you play us out, but before we do that, I would just like to say thank you to St. Andrew and St. Luke Episcopal Church here, Father John F. Williams, to our hardworking SongSmith crew, Ian Hatton on audio, Brian Fitzgerald and Adam DePel humping the lights around, our SongSmith production team of Rhea Banerjee and Zoe Markwalter, our executive producer John Kelly, without whom, as I always say, literally none of this happens. And finally, on a personal note, I would just like to say that 1 year ago today, we lost a really wonderful human being to COVID. His name was Mike Herron. He was a very good friend of mine. He was a tremendous music fan, a great supporter of live music of all sorts. He's sorely missed. Please get vaccinated, be careful, use common sense, and above all, be kind to each other. Thanks for watching SongSmith. We'll see you next time. And once again, new Muse.